Magnus Infernum.
Greetings, this is Magnus Infernum, with a great casual deck tech for beginning players and life-gaining enthusiasts alike, Junk Life Gain. First things first, the life gain part of the deck's name is rather intuitive, but why junk? Well, before the Tarkir set was released, white-black-green decks were not referred to as Abzan, but as junk, in which the deck has high-valued cards with little to no synergy with one another, and this eventually became synonymous with white-black-green decks. Not only has this terminology been replaced with Abzan, but now mostly defined by its color identity, since these decks now have superior cohesion when compared to its past iterations. The goal of this deck is to gain you life, and then when the deck is running out of steam, you play spells that allow you to draw cards in exchange for life. And that life gain train starts with 3 Arashin Clerics and 3 Lone Missionaries, gaining you 3 and 4 life respectively while adding a defensive 1-3 body and offensive 2-1 body to the battlefield. You'll have an early game presence allowing you to comfortably play the heavy-hitting cards as well as casting the painful draw spells later in the game. Next up is the life-gaining teeth of the deck, and leading the pack is a playset of Siege Rhino. A now dollar rare, this 4-cost creature applies immediate pressure by hitting all of your opponents for 3 while simultaneously gaining you 3 life. And a 4/5 creature with trample for just a converted mana cost to 4 is nothing to scoff at. Thragtusk is a jerk. Thragtusk is a heavy hitter at 5/3 that pops into the field, gaining you 5 life. And when it leaves the battlefield, you get a 3/3 green beast token. All of this upside for only 5 mana, and Thragtusk will only cost you about $1 to $2. You'll only need to play 3 of this card as to not make your mana curve too top heavy. But if you're feeling a little excitable, go ahead and add a 4th one into the deck. It wouldn't hurt to trade it out for one of the other cards. And here's an underrated dragon that flies under many people's radar, Sunscorch Regent. For 3 generic mana and 2 white mana, you will get a 4/3 flying dragon with a triggered ability. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Sunscorch Regent and you gain 1 life. One aspect about this card that I thoroughly enjoy is that the +1/+1 counters go on the creature as a spell is cast and not necessarily when it resolves. So if an opponent tries casting a spell like Lightning Strike onto Sunscorch Regent, it would get the counter before the damage is dealt, and thus it would not be sufficient enough damage to send it to the graveyard. And even if the opponent's spell is countered by another spell or ability, the dragon will still receive the +1/+1 counter regardless, and you will gain the 1 life. It's also nice that this card has flying, since there are so few flying creatures in the deck, albeit a little later than sooner. But its 5 mana cost can be mitigated by the life-gaining properties of the deck. A 3 of this card will work fine. You don't want to have too many of these cards sitting in your opening hand. And the last life-gaining card is also the biggest, Pelakka Wurm. An amazing budget casual card, it can easily be picked up for 10 to 25 cents. Its weighty 7 cost of 4 generic and 3 green holds this monster back. But for a 7/7 trample that enters the battlefield, gaining you 7 life and drawing you a card when it is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, Pelakka Wurm is a respectable card with some value to back it up. With that said, only have 2 of them. The mana cost is too high to prompt more into the deck. Now for the deck's draw power, which only 1/6 of the deck is comprised of. You'll be running 4 of the tempo-retaining Phyrexian Rager, a simple black creature card that is a 2/2 for 3. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and lose 1 life. It feels surprisingly good playing this card on turn 3, especially after playing one of life-gaining 2-drops on the previous turn and you still have more life than when you started with. From a simple 2/2, jumping up to a 6/6 flyer, Kothophed Soul Hoarder costs 4 generic and 2 black. Whenever a permanent owned by another player is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. There are quite a few things to note from this card. First and foremost, its trigger ability is not a May ability, it is mandatory. So if you find yourself low on life, this card will punish you. Secondly, its ability is not just for creatures like you would more commonly find on cards like these, but for all permanents. Lastly, and what might be the most intriguing condition of this card, the triggered required only takes note of a permanent owned by another player and not necessarily controlled by that player. While the deck doesn't play this way, if you were to gain control of an opponent's permanent, and at some point it leaves the battlefield going into the owner's graveyard, it is still then compulsory for you to draw a card and lose 1 life. And as far as how many you should have in the deck, since this is a high-cost legendary creature, you will only be needing 2 in the deck. The last draw spell is a full playset of Painful Truths, a black sorcery spell for 2 generic and 1 black mana with the Battle for Zendikar original mechanic, Converge. You draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of colors of mana spent to cast Painful Truths. More often than not, it will end up drawing you 2 cards and losing you 3 life. but it does have the added versatility of granting only 1 or 2 cards depending on how you tap your mana. Of course, if you end up missing 1 or even worse, 2 colors of the non-black mana, you might end up not getting that choice. Luckily, this card tends to be played later in the game, so having the right kind of mana isn't normally too much of an issue. Now, one advantage of playing white, black, and green is the capabilities that each color brings to the table that of course isn't counterspell. So push this advantage with 3 Mortify and 3 Putrefy, allowing you to destroy creatures, artifacts, and enchantments alike to help you clear the field for your own creatures. The next card with utility is Ready and Willing. Ready is 1 generic, 1 green, and 1 white instant that gives your creatures indestructibility until end of turn as well as untapping them. Willing is a 1 generic, 1 white, and 1 black instant spell that reads, creatures you control gain Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. And with the Fuse mechanic from Dragon Maze, you can spend all 6 mana to use both cards. This can help save your creatures from board wipes and or make your creatures into effective killing machines for any of your opponent's creatures blocking or blocked by them. But if you find this card strongly needed in your deck based on your playgroup, go ahead and add another one in. Lastly is Creeping Renaissance. This is an amazing card for casual creature-based decks. A sorcery for 3 generic and 2 green. Choose a permanent type. Return all cards of the chosen type from your graveyard to your hand. And as an added bonus, it has flashback for 5 generic and 2 green, allowing it to be cast from your graveyard. If and when the game becomes a battle attrition or your opponent just oh so loves blowing up the field, you can get your creatures back into your hand and reap the rewards of the Enter the Battlefield effects all over again. You only need 1 of these, but if you're really digging this card, you can take out a Ready and Willing for an additional Creeping Renaissance since they both muscle into each other's territory of supporting your creatures en masse. Now for the land base, and seeing how this is a casual deck, I'm avoiding lands like Verdant Catacombs and Temple Garden since they will make the price of the deck skyrocket. The deck is going to play 24 lands, and let's start it off with Sandsteppe Citadel. A non-basic land that enters the battlefield, but in return it can produce white, black, or green mana. Making it invaluable in a 3-color budget deck, this is a 4-card auto-include. A pretty cool addition that stays with the life-gaining theme of the deck is Blossoming Sands, Jungle Hollow, and Scoured Barrens. Each of these non-basic lands enter the battlefield tapped and gain you 1 life while being able to add 2 of the 3 mana colors of the deck. Add 1 of each if you are worried about slowing the deck down with the Enter the Battlefield tapped ability. If not, go ahead and throw 2 of each of these in. Finally, the basic lands of course are Plains, Swamp, and Forest. Many of the black and green cards tend to be played later in the game, so you'll only need 5 swamps and 5 forests. Since there are plenty of early to mid-game white cards, you'll be throwing 8 plains into the deck. And of course, if you decide to put in more non-basic lands, then you will be removing the basic lands proportionately. If you're interested in a few alterations, Phyrexian Gargantua could be used as a replacement for Kothophed Soul Hoarder. It has an immediate draw power as opposed to Kothophed's potentially more powerful yet less controllable draw ability. Then there is Night Whisper, a cheaper yet weaker Painful Truths. Absent Charm's modular capabilities can get rid of a powerful creature, instant speed draw 2 cards and lose 2 life, or grant a buff up for 2 of your creatures. There's also Inspiring Cleric, a stronger early life gain creature that costs 3 mana instead of 2. There's also Dusk Legion Zealot, which is a cheaper yet weaker Phyrexian Rager. And if you're interested in adding a Planeswalker to the deck, you can't go wrong with a Johnny Goldmane. His abilities to gain you life as well as pumping up your creatures fit very well into the deck. And if you're interested in a Planeswalker whose abilities run parallel with the deck's capabilities of drawing you cards at the cost of life as well as destroying target creature, look no further than Ob Nixilis. To conclude, this deck tries to flood the board with creatures that gain you life while playing cards that prevent you from running out of gas at the cost of some life. It also holds the added bonus of being able to destroy artifact, creatures, and enchantments. A very straightforward deck. Overall, this is a solid 3-color beginner's deck that has the budget around $15 to $20, with Siege Rhino, Thragtusk, and Mortify being the most expensive cards at around $1 each. Thank you very much for watching. If you could leave a comment, I would be interested to know what you think about the deck. If you enjoyed the content, then press the like button. If you found the video displeasing, then press the dislike button. Bolt that subscribe button to stay up to date with future videos. This is Magnus Infernum. Till we meet again.